So now that we've got a general understanding of what culture is, let's start talking more directly about why we as sociologists are so invested in understanding culture. So I think the best way to do this is to apply our term, the sociological imagination, to culture. Remember, when we were talking about the sociological imagination, we're talking about an individual's ability to understand and see how seemingly individual choices, ideas, and beliefs are connected and influenced to these larger social structures. And it's also a way for us as individuals to kind of make sense of differences in societies and cultures around the world, right? Remember, I always say a sociological imagination is kind of like taking a ride in a hot air balloon and getting a new perspective on the world, right? Kind of seeing things from this broader perspective, having a bigger understanding or a different understanding about how people and societies kind of interact with and work with one another. So culture is really like water to a fish. I think this is a great analogy here. Culture is like water to a fish. It's all around us, but we hardly recognize it's there. And this can be really dangerous, right? This can be really dangerous because, again, as sociologists, remember, we're always looking for the strange and the familiar, the general and the particular, right? We're really trying to ask those why questions. Why do people believe in the things that they do? Why do people practice the customs that they do? And when we constantly take those things for granted, when we don't question them, it causes us to get really rigid and kind of stubborn in our beliefs and stubborn in the ways that we view and understand the world, and especially stubborn with how we compare ourselves, our values, and our beliefs to those of others, especially those that are different than us, right? So we often take our speech, our gestures, our beliefs, and our customs for granted, assuming that our culture is quote unquote normal or natural, or that the way that we do things in our particular society is just the way that it ought to be. We think that since we do it here, and we've been socialized to really heavily value and prioritize our society and our cultural beliefs as being the best, it causes us to become very judgmental towards any society that has cultural practices that are different than our own. This is a very, very important sociological note to take here, all right? There is absolutely nothing that makes our own culture, I'm talking about us in the United States here, there's nothing that makes our culture more normal or natural or better than any other culture around the world, right? We've been taught to think that our culture is the best because we live in a society. The United States is notoriously known around the world, unfortunately by many other countries, as being kind of conceited. We're pretty full of ourselves here. There's a reason that the saying, USA is number one, or America's number one. Not every country around the world thinks that. We've been taught to really build ourselves up, and in some aspects that can be a good thing. It's good to have a sense of pride in our culture and in our society, definitely. But the downside to that is that we can become very blinded by the pride that we've been socialized to have in our culture as the United States. Because when we think that we're the best at everything, when we think that we have, the best education system, the best healthcare system, the most wealth, the strongest military, it causes us to be blind to the ways that other societies and other cultures are doing things. And it causes us to be blind to recognizing the insufficiencies or the problems that we actually have in our culture. Spoiler alert, the United States does not have the best healthcare system in the world. We do not have the best education system in the world. We have people dying at younger ages in comparison to many other countries. We have people dying of preventable illnesses at higher rates than many other countries. Our test results for students at virtually every age bracket from elementary school all the way through college are significantly lower than almost every other industrialized nation in the living world. So there's lots of things that we get blinded by just because of our American value to really idolize and prioritize American cultural values as being the best. And as sociologists, we are able to see that because we have our sociological imaginations. We can take a ride up in our hot air balloons and recognize that, all right, in the United States, we've been socialized from a young age to really prioritize American values and cultures as being good, because that's what we're taught as being a good American citizen is, We have Independence Day, an entire holiday where we celebrate our country. In elementary school, what's the very first thing we have kids do in the United States every day in elementary school? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, right? So we have these practices in place from a very young age to socialize us into this thinking, this thought process that the United States is the best country in the world, and therefore all of our cultural practices must be the best. And that gets dangerous because it causes us to think negatively about other cultures that are different than our own without actually doing any thinking, in-depth thinking or critical thinking about that. How often have you ever questioned why America is the best country in the world? Have you ever asked yourself that question? What criteria are we evaluating ourselves on? Like I said, we're not the healthiest country in the world by a long shot. We're not the smartest country in the world. We're not even close to being the happiest country in the world. So we fail on virtually every measure that it would make sense to evaluate us as being the best, yet we still have this value and this belief in our society that the United States is the best. All right. So I'm not saying this to be anti-American, right? I love the US. I live here. I choose to live here. But do I think we have problems? Absolutely. Do I think we're blinded by our own tendencies to support our values and criticize and kind of make enemies out of other cultures that are different? Yeah, I think there's a lot of work that we can do. But that's why sociology is so powerful. It's a really helpful tool to help us kind of break down the biases that we have and to become more critical thinkers using our sociological imaginations. Now, it's important to put this into context. Like I said, there's a lot of things that we do in practice in the United States that to us seem totally quote unquote normal that are very, very bizarre to people from all other countries around the world. Here are just a few examples. Drinking coffee to go, right? Things like in Starbucks, where you go in and you typically just get your paper cup of coffee and take it out the door with you. That is a very, very weird practice, especially in a lot of European countries, where it's the more common practice to actually go and get your coffee at a cafe or at a restaurant and to get it in an actual glass cup and drink it in the cafe and then go on your way, go to work, go to school, whatever. So that's just one example. Customizing restaurant orders. Again, in the US, I worked as a server for 11 years, all while I was in college, from my undergraduate degree all through finishing my PhD. And, I got very great at being flexible and accommodating for people that wanted to, have it their way and customize, okay, can I get the chicken and strawberry salad, but no pecans, no feta cheese, and instead of raspberry vinaigrette, can I get Caesar dressing on the side? Oh, and please, no mixed greens, only romaine lettuce, And it's just a norm in U.S. culture. We come to expect that when we go to a restaurant, we expect people, patrons, guests in the restaurant to want to customize things to their own liking. In other cultures around the world, if you would go in a restaurant and try and customize an order, you could potentially get kicked out of a restaurant. You might get looked at very strangely by the staff working there and say, no, we do not make any substitutions. Because in other cultures around the world, it is not a culturally acceptable practice to make such drastic revisions to the orders. Giving a thumbs up. This is another great example. In the United States, this means, yeah, good job, good for you. In other cultures around the world, like we talked about, though, this can mean up yours, So that's, again, another cultural practice that is common to the US, but not necessarily common everywhere around the world. Referring to ourselves simply as America, right? This is another practice that we do. Everyone just calls, a lot of people refer to the United States as America, when in reality, it is just one of many, many countries that constitute the Americas, right? We have North America, Central America, and South America. Why do we think we just get to call ourselves America? Yeah, sure, it's part of our country's name, the United States of America, but that doesn't mean we get to just own America when there are literally dozens of other countries that constitute the Americas. And this is just one of the small reasons, like I said before, that other countries around the world think we're kind of egomaniacs because we do things like this without even questioning it, right? Why do we think that this is okay? Would be a question a sociologist would ask. Our obsession with pumpkin flavored everything during the fall is something that the US also gets a lot of flack for, right? We're entering the fall season now, so, pumpkin spice lattes are going to be on fleek. Pumpkin spice candles are going to be on sale at Target, and in a lot of places around the world, pumpkin is just like a general cooking ingredient that is used year round. But in the US, we associate it so much with fall and autumn and Halloween that we flavor everything with pumpkin just for like 2 months out of the year and then totally forget about it the rest of the year. Another bizarre practice. Oh, a few others here. We're one of the few industrialized countries that doesn't use the metric system. For whatever reason, we want to use inches and miles and pounds instead of centimeters and kilometers and kilograms, which makes things just more difficult for us when we travel because we're not taught to understand the metric system in our elementary school system here as much as we are to use the system that we use. We write dates very differently than most countries. We write the date in terms of the month, the actual day of the month, and then the year. Most countries do it opposite. They write the date first, then the month, and then the year, which again causes a lot of confusion if you ever travel outside of the United States. The whole custom of celebrating baby showers is something that's very odd to many countries outside of the US. Excessive smiling and laughing in public. I almost always have a smile on my face when I'm teaching, when I'm interacting with people. And in a lot of countries around the world, they're a little more stoic. It's not considered unfriendly if you walk up to someone and have a conversation with someone and just keep a flat face and only smile when something particularly funny happens or was said. But here in the US, we just are kind of taught that we should always have a pleasant demeanor on our face, and a lot of us do, and that's something that's considered very strange and bizarre. Paying for college and healthcare are things we do in the United States that other countries think are very bizarre and archaic. Again, for the country that claims to have the best of everything, when we are, we spend billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, in fact, every year paying for college and healthcare. And other countries do these things for free for their citizens, so we're viewed as kind of bizarre for having to pay for these what are considered essential human rights in a lot of other industrialized countries. And so these are just a handful of ways, and I'm sure if you talk to anyone that's not from the United States, you could find a million other things that we do that other countries think are weird or not normal or not natural, right? So it's really just the perspective of where you come from that enables us to make these decisions about what's good or bad, right or wrong, normal or abnormal. But as sociologists, I'm going to challenge us to get out of this mindset of labeling any behavior as good or bad, right or wrong, normal or abnormal. Let's just recognize that we all have different cultural practices depending on the societies that we were raised in, right? And now in the following sections, we're going to start talking more in detail about why it becomes problematic when we value our own system of beliefs and customs more heavily and problematize those of different cultures because it contributes to these systems of inequality and oppression.